Live. Here we go.
Here we go. Right, got it. Cool. How are you doing, Milo?
Yeah, got my game face on.
The game face.
I don't know what that means.
What was the game
I'm
face?
just ready for the Facebook Live.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about food logging today. Trigger for many people. I think those who have tried it, maybe haven't tried it before. Those who have tried it before potentially had difficulty with it before, or even just some concepts around it. I think the other thing that'll be interesting in this is you still track food at the moment, right?
I do, yeah, I do. Like in different ways. Like I see kind of like tracking food is very much a continuum.
Yeah, I think that's things. I think your tracking food will differ from many people that we potentially work with, and that it depends on where you are, but also what goals you're kind of trying to chase, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So for the sake of today, we might talk about, as to you kind of weight gain or muscle kind of hypertrophy, or at least that was the beginning of yours. But for the sake of today, we're primarily talking about weight loss.
Yeah.
So is it good for you, Milo? Is it bad for you? Where do you stand on this?
There's the big I think it's depending on which I think it's good in the short term and can be good in the long term. I think let's just look at the short-term benefits of it. Is it gives you an insight into your eating habits, because unless you have what you eat laid out in front of you, can you remember what you ate last Monday? Probably not. I think it's another thing. It makes you a little bit more conscious about what you eat, as well as just increases your knowledge in food, because we are some people when we talk to some people and they go, can you just list a few protein sources? And they may come up with some of the superstars like chicken and other meat products, tofu, but then some people may say nuts is a high in protein. And I think, tracking in some way increases that knowledge. And also at the end of the day, we track in some way, or we log food in some way to basically achieve a goal. So it's a targeted way of achieving goals. So I think there's definitely more benefits for it for most that outstrip the negatives.
100% agree. Yeah, I think it's worth touching on at least the perceived negatives, which are people think it's obsessive. And the truth is it can. Ooh, can you still see me, Milo? It looks like I've just frozen with my mouth open.
You have frozen with your mouth open.
Let me sort myself out.
Oh, there you go. Right. Sorted.
Yeah, so there are many people, I think, who can go down a bad route with it, and I would argue that's primarily in bodybuilding circles, or circles where there's an extreme goal being chased after, right? Because you really like the nitty gritty really matters. We're talking like gram by gram and calorie by calorie makes a difference here, and yes, it can become overly obsessive. But the truth is that's not the whole story. It's not for many people. And again, like there's many things that we track and we don't automatically call it obsessive. I'll keep stealing the comparison from James Smith, which is like if you're wanting to buy a house or save money up for literally anything, you're probably going to start tracking your ingoings and outgoings, right? Like you're going to become a little bit aware through objective tracking on your finances to get you closer to the savings that you need, right? So why wouldn't we do that with food? Otherwise, we're either relying on certain strategies that tend to be quite restrictive so that we don't have to worry about actually what we're eating, if that makes sense. So if I went extreme low carb, or like exclusion diet or fasting, all these things, I don't need to track because I'm eating in such a restricted way that I'm probably going to consume a deficit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think in a sense you're loosely tracking by following a system.
Yeah,
on that front.
Whereas tracking, arguably, it's my preferred method for most people starting this, because it means that you can actually eat the same, if not very close to what you're eating now, and still see some results. And if anything, just start to get to know actually how you're eating, where you could make micro changes to improve your diet. And it's a lot more of a progressive model, as opposed to the alternative, which is so extreme that you don't need to track, if that makes sense.
I think, if we look at what you're saying there, the overall goal of tracking is, I guess, just to, first of all, give us an idea of the portion control. Because I think when we're talking about weight loss, the biggest reason, well, not the biggest reason, a main reason why people are not getting there is they're just not really sure of how much to eat. They second guess themselves. Some meals they might have less, some meals they might have more. And I think it's just tracking just allows you to give you that objective data of just knowing if you're eating the right amount of food for where you want to go.
I think you've opened us up to our next point perfectly there, Milo.
Oh,
Where do you think most people should start with food tracking?
I think, sometimes like something you told me a long time ago, Dan, it was maybe like 3-4 years ago, is if you can't deal with fats, carbs, and proteins all at the same time, that's like juggling 3 balls and failing. But a good place to start is if you can juggle. I've absolutely hashed that analogy. You were saying
I literally never remember saying it, but I'll take it.
Basically, you're saying if you can't get protein right to start off with, that's like almost kind of juggling with 1 ball and failing. So there's no point adding another couple of balls in, carbs and fats, and trying to juggle with 3 balls if you can't juggle 1 ball. So I think a really good place to start for most, and that intermediate into getting into tracking maybe everything, is just starting by gauging where your protein is. Because I think there's one thing that, and probably something that you agree with, is that most people come in and don't eat enough protein for their goals to be able to thrive.
100%. I come at it the same way in a different way, so that it makes any sense whatsoever. So I tend to hit, if it's a weight loss goal again, primarily we're aiming for calories. So that for me, that's the truth of like, if we're going to get you to lose weight, I need to create a calorie deficit. Primarily, I'm going to do that through a reduction in calorie intake. Sorry, that sounded brief and sciencey.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not hard and fast with those goals because, again, it has to be, well, where are you at the moment? And the truth is, when I get someone to start tracking, and I always say this, like, change nothing. Eat exactly as you do day to day, just log it. And in saying that, I know that 100% they're not going to eat the same way that they always eat, because the nature of us tracking is that we're going to go snack on something that we normally would, and we go, I don't want to write that. So just in the act of tracking, we start to clear up our nutrition a little bit anyway. I'll often bring in an additional kind of education piece where at the end of a couple of weeks of tracking, I go, cool, what is not in here that would normally be in here? Because we can often recognize those times that we've started to adjust stuff. So first and foremost, we've got the calories that we're trying to kind of consume less, and tracking that on its own makes the difference there. The thing that I often put with that, which is what you said here, is protein. Now, protein is an easy one that, again, I could say, hey, you're eating 50 grams of protein right now. I want you to eat 150. There's no way you're going to go from 50 to 150. What I'm really saying is, let's start to recognize where your protein's coming in, and let's see how we can increase that. Because not only is that going to help you expend more calories, but it's going to make it far easier to maintain the reduction in calories that you've got. So simultaneously, we're consuming less food and therefore losing weight, but we're also increasing the macronutrient that makes us feel satiated. It gives us longer energy. It helps our recovery in the gym. It basically benefits everything else.
I think, what you're kind of saying is using this tracking as basically a learning tool to see where where there's gaps in your nutrition, and just to build on based on your goals. Because you can lose weight on a low protein diet. Is it nice? Is it easy? Probably not. And it's just building that awareness that, you may benefit from having more protein. And as you say, you don't go from 50 to 100 in one day, or most people don't, but it's just that very awareness of, I don't eat any protein at lunch and breakfast, I only eat protein at dinner, just can build you and cause you to tick towards your goal.
I haven't said it for a little while, so I'll say it now. What gets measured gets managed. And that it's exactly that point of building awareness. When you start to track, like, actually, I didn't realize that. Number one, I didn't realize that protein was important. And number two, I didn't realize that I was only consuming 40 grams per day. When actually, according to these arbitrary metrics, I should be consuming 140 to 160 grams per day. Where am I getting that in? How can I get it in? And we just start to educate. It's exactly that. It's building awareness, and it's educating ourselves through that process. So with that in mind, then, kind of main final point, what are some of the biggest reasons that it often doesn't work, or the pitfalls with food tracking? And then simultaneously with that, each time we can kind of talk about how maybe we could do that more, how we could overcome those issues, if that makes sense.
So I think one of the first things is that I see people struggle with is sometimes consistency with tracking. Like again, if I can get a full week's data or even a full day's data, then we can use that to judge. But if we're not even in the position to be able to do that, suddenly we're kind of falling at hurdle 1 and we can't get a picture. I think the other things in terms of tracking accuracy is I see a lot of people eyeballing food, or taking, they've got a packet which is 300 grams and they have half of that packet and they expect it to be 150 grams. And when in all likelihood, just because it says 300 grams on the packet doesn't mean that it can't be 350, doesn't mean it can't be 250. So I think the other thing is we need to use a scale to get a accurate representation of what it is.
So again, when we're talking about weight loss, like you said before, portions matter.
Yeah.
And the truth is we can eyeball it badly. Again, especially early days. Further down the road, you might be more educated enough to be able to accurately eyeball things. I think for the amount of time you've done it, Milo, you could probably eyeball stuff to an 85% accuracy rating.
Yeah.
There's still margin for error in that, but compared to most, I think most people maybe have a 50% hit rate if they were to eyeball it. And that's probably optimistic. So we do need to try and measure as accurately as possible in the early stages. But again, the way I put this to most people, especially when they're just getting into food tracking, is it's practice. So like right now, I just want you to put the foods that you eat, put them in. Whatever way you can do that, get into that. But recognize this is a thing that we're going to practice at and we're going to get better with.
Yeah.
And progressively, we're going to start to measure things. We're going to use more precise recipes. If right now, if like we've got one, which is you essentially putting in the wrong foods in the wrong quantities on the wrong days, that's a 1 out of 10. And a 10 is everything is perfectly measured. We've got the exact foods that are going in. Like we know that everything is bang on and perfectly accurate. We're probably going to be starting off at a 3 or 4, and slowly we're just going to try and nudge that up 1 point along that continuum, along maybe a 4 to 6 week period.
So I think the thing that's coming, sometimes it's, when we're only achieving that 1 out of 10, like tracking can be very intimidating for some, or not necessarily intimidating, but it's this extra stage of eating which we have to put in. And when in the morning we're already in a rush for breakfast, and you can see how inaccuracies can arise from that. But I think it's one of those, like any skill, if you've never done it before, you're not going to be that good at it. And the more that you do it, the more that it suddenly comes, actually, just weighing a piece of bread in the morning, knowing how much whatever I have in the morning, doesn't actually become that much of a chore, because the reality is it takes 10 seconds longer than you would have. But initially it feels like it might take 2 to 3 minutes.
Same as anything that we pick up new, right? We just practice, we get better at it. And the truth is it gets easier. It gets so much easier.
Yeah.
It gets to the point that you don't even have to think about it because you've just practiced it and it's become automatic.
I think, something for me now, when I'm quite experienced in doing this, is it's not really, again, like, first of all, it's very much I'm aligned to where my goals are. And I think that definitely helps, because it's not like I'm not going to track. It's just one of those things I do.
Yeah. So inside of that, if we say global statement, progressively become more accurate in tracking. We've spoken about accurately measuring. So I'd say using scales, using jugs if we're talking liquids, understand the milliliters that you're actually using. Don't eyeball it. Whether it be tablespoon, teaspoon, actually get the measurements, be sure of the quantities and the portions that you're using.
Yeah.
The other thing that I find that people do that is the most detrimental to their practices in food logging is tracking after the fact. So what I mean by that is at the end of the day, logging what they ate. It's, I mean, there's research to back this up. 50% of it, absolute crap. Like we can't be trusted to remember what we ate, even if it's like the morning or the day. If you have your phone, we've all got a phone by us all the time. Let's admit it. Like it's a problem. But that app is then there, or whatever you're using to food log. If it goes in here, it should immediately go in here.
Yeah.
And again, that, although it initially seems like a bit of an initial task, that is a 15-second then and there, as opposed to the end of the day, 5 to 15 minutes trying to remember it and put it all in and remember the measurements and yada yada.
Yeah, because I can't even remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone had the quantities of it on that front. So
I mean, an hour ago, did I have 2 or 3 slices of salmon? I don't know.
yeah, you do. No, you don't.
No. If I was there going like counting them as I'm going and it's a part of a process, yeah, 100%. That's I can go in and log that. But after the fact, it's just it's not something that we put enough awareness into to be able to recall it appropriately.
Yeah, I think there's another thing which I find that happens quite a lot is sometimes because some people make a meal and they may have 20 ingredients in that can become, you know, a little bit challenging to track. And it's okay if you're used to it, but initially if you've got a recipe that has 20 ingredients, that can be a lot to get through. And I think one thing which definitely helps with accuracy is just simplifying your food. Like you can make a meal which has 10 ingredients and still taste great, and it just simplifies it and also makes it probably easier to achieve your goals.
Yeah, 100%. I'd also like on the flip side of the same point, I often say, you know, when we have people working, we primarily use MyFitnessPal because the truth is it's the most accessible for most people. When people are using it, I often say, if you have any issues, let me know, because the truth is it's easier than you think it is. And there's so many bits and pieces in the app that actually make complex things very, very easy. And one of those things is the recipe section. So you can add recipes, basically meaning, let's say you're cooking a massive elaborate meal for 4 people. You can just, as you're kind of cooking, let's say it's on the pan or whatever, if the ingredient goes into the cooking process, it goes in the app. That gets stored as a recipe, and then you can select a serving as a portion of that total recipe. So whether it's a quarter of it because you split it amongst 4, whether it's, you know, you putting that portion on a plate, zeroing the plate on the scales, right, putting the portion on and then having that amount of that portion. That is one of the things that, again, if you were to try and work that out after the fact, absolute nightmare. But if you know that there is that recipe section on the MyFitnessPal app and you know how to use that, so much easier.
Yeah, and I think, you know, let's face it, most of our repertoire of food, we do eat similar things in a, you know, in a similar month sort of cycle. Yes, there's going to be variation on that, but we do tend to have similar things each week.
Yeah, 100%. You put that recipe in once, and suddenly that's in the library of things that you can come back to before. As long as you're putting in the same measurements of food in the recipe, which again you've already got scales about, so you're doing that, then that again just makes that process so much easier.
Yeah, definitely on that one.
I think we've yabbered on, Milo.
Yeah.
Are there any other big ones for you with food tracking?
I think it's just one of those, just understanding that, like, if you're seriously having trouble tracking, like, and staying consistency, just understand there's a spectrum of tracking, and this is a whole other subject. Like, if you think of it, it starts with like mindless eating, i.e. not even thinking about what you're tracking, and then it ends to something more precise like tracking. So I think just understand that if it's not working for you, there are other options out there, you know, i.e. hand portions, plate, using your plate as a guide, which might be just as effective.
100%. Yeah, and again, if you have any questions about any of this or want any further assistance, like drop us a message, drop a comment in here, reach out to us directly. Like, we're always happy to have the conversation. That's what we're here to help with this. And again, having someone who knows how to do this or has done this or has helped other people do this can be a big help. But we recognize that if you're at the front end of this and you haven't experienced it before, it can be pretty intimidating. But I promise, if you ask questions, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
Cool, Milo. I'm happy if you are.
Yeah, all good.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week. I'll see you later, Milo.
See you next week.